Yeah, I've got ADHD, but I really have to take responsibility.
It's almost like a new form of masking. Like, I'm not masking as a neurotypical person anymore.
Not reading emails is how I've ended up going to Norway and doing a panel discussion about democracy, because I thought it was a comedy panel show.
Today's episode is very special and something I've wanted to do for a very long time. I sat down with some of ADHD Chatter's incredible guests to share their stories and swap experiences to help make sense of it all. We have the privilege of being here with Kat Brown, author and journalist.
I initially found giving up drinking quite challenging was because it shone a light onto how much social anxiety I was covering with that.
Stacey Duguid, author and journalist.
And they cried about my book. So I was like, what am I doing hiding away?
Ellie Middleton, ADHD activist and author.
Just wish that I could have one day where everything would run smoothly.
Shappi Khorsandi, comedian and author.
Like meeting like really powerful people in the comedy industry and deciding what I was going to tell them was how I died on my arse last week, and think, oh, that's really great because I made them laugh. It's like, no, what you did was just batter yourself into the ground in front of people.
Yes.
This sponsored ad was agreed to be 90 seconds long, but because I know most of you have ADHD, I negotiated it down to 89 seconds. I challenge you to test your ADHD by seeing if you can sit still for 1 minute 30 seconds while I tell you about our sponsor, Tiimo app. If I can sit down and record take after take of this message for 2 hours, then I'm sure you can listen to 90 seconds. So here's a short word from our sponsor. Tiimo app is a perfectly tailored app that I use daily, and maybe it's worth you giving it a try to see how it might improve organising your life too. Running a podcast is actually a lot harder than you might think, and juggling all of the moving parts would be near impossible if it weren't for Tiimo app. How? Well, Tiimo is designed specifically to hack the neurodivergent brain, a brain that might struggle with time agnosia, object permanence, memory cognitive load, task initiation, anxiety, or procrastination. All things I'm extremely guilty of too. And how on earth does it help you, Alex? I hear you scream impatiently at your computer or phone screens. Well, the award-winning Tiimo app is the perfect life-hacking tool to help your time management and kick you up the bum when you need it most. If you want to stay ahead of the competition, then the visual planning Tiimo app is specifically designed to help your structuring, organising, focusing, and goal setting. It has a visual timer providing a tangible and visual representation of time to help users pace themselves so you never miss a deadline ever again. It also has an efficient lock screen reminder service to alert those of you who are very out of sight, out of mind with your chores and afraid you might forget them. It brilliantly centres all of your tasks in one place across devices, both on a web and mobile apps, to streamline your overflowing schedules and make them much more digestible and a lot less intimidating. And for those who find big tasks too overwhelming to even start, Tiimo breaks them down into more manageable subtasks to get the ball rolling. In fact, this app helps me so much that it actually reminded me to record this message to advertise the app. Give it a go. Why not? It might just help. Anyway, back to the episode. Thank you all for joining us on an ADHD Chatter first, hopefully not the last. I've interviewed you all on ADHD Chatter. I've heard you share your stories, and it's been massively beneficial to hundreds of thousands of people. I think to get things going and to start off the conversation, I suppose I'd be curious to know what you've learned about yourself and ADHD since our episodes together. And I suppose I'll start with Kat.
It's a nice big question to get things kicked off with. I think the thing that comes to mind first is actually that it's not so much about just ADHD for me. It's about how it fits into all the other layers of my life. And I'm fascinated in the way that things that I've picked up either from being part of a 12-step program or therapy or, reading or just, chatting to friends and stuff, how much that has really helped me coming to terms with how my brain works and not just how my brain works, but how it sort of fits into life. This whole discovery has sort of really coincided with quite a horrendous series of like health problems for me, which has also meant that yeah, I'm on your podcast and it's amazing and this is really lovely and I've got a book out. Also, I haven't been able to like work properly and I haven't been able to my mind, pull my weight at home, if you like. And so I've been feeling like a horrendous like imposter, and knowing that actually weirdly that sort of feeds into the ADHD and the emotional dysregulation, that has sort of helped make dealing with it all a little bit more possible. And not now that I'm sort of coming out into the end with it and I will never be unwell again and nothing bad will ever happen again. But my God, it's just really helped in terms of why everything has just been more difficult than I thought it would be.
Imposter syndrome is huge, isn't it? Does anyone else relate to that?
All the time. I feel like sometimes I'm living out like a dual life of like Ellie Middleton, the autism and ADHD expert, and then Ellie. And I'm like, I think it's like that thing of like taking your own advice. Like I can tell people why you're feeling that way. I can tell people what you should do to not feel that way. I can tell people how you can support yourself, how you can make yourself feel better. And then I can still feel horrendous and feel awful and feel all of those things. So I do think that there is that. And I think it's like really frustrating as well, because it's like there's no way to get that across to people without like bearing your soul all of the time. Like I can't post a story on Instagram every time I'm having a bad day because I don't want to go anywhere near a camera and I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't want to do anything. But I definitely think there is like, it feels like that duality sometimes of like, this is the bright, shiny person that the world sees. It's almost like a new form of masking. Like I'm not masking as a neurotypical person anymore, but I'm masking as like the ADHD expert, even though that's still...
It's like really clever.
Yeah, it's not like... It's still not me. It's just a different mask, I think. Sometimes I feel like, yeah.
Very relatable. You sort of do you feel like you've pigeonholed yourself into this version of Ellie on social media, this sort of neurodivergent advocate? And is there a gap between that person and who you really are?
I think so. I think it is that. I think a lot of people actually, like, because there's so many people getting diagnosed at the moment, I think, and because like the neurodivergent community is so active now online, I do think that a lot of people go through that stage of like, it feels like unmasking, but it's actually just a different type of masking almost, of like, this is the new people that I can please and this is the new like box that I can put myself into. It's a box that's more like me, but it's still a box. And I think I'm almost like, it seems like going backwards to like who I was pre-diagnosis, but it's actually just that I like went in the wrong direction almost. Like I think there are so many of my like interests, and like I love going to the football, I love going to gigs, I love like all of those things, which I sort of stopped being interested, or like thinking that was interesting. So I was like, I can't enjoy going to the football because it's loud and it's busy, and I can't enjoy going to gigs because it's overstimulating and all that stuff. I'm like, no, I did enjoy all that stuff. It was hard for me and it was overwhelming, but I still do love it. So I do think there's almost like, a bit of a re-navigation of like, what was unmasking and what was just like picking up a new mask on the way.
Oh, it's a constant like, tug of war, I feel, between the presentation that comes out in public and on social media against what is inside. Do you relate to that, Stacey?
Oh, massively, yeah. I was, I think, maybe one of the first women to write about ADHD in a newspaper. I wrote an article 3-4 years ago in the Sunday Times style. My therapist of 5 years suggested one day, rather politely, perhaps you are bipolar. And I was like, perhaps I should leave. I stood up, left, went back the next week. I said, I really did not appreciate that. Thank you very much. But do you think I am? Anyway, she sent me off to the psychiatrist. I got diagnosed. And then I wrote about it in that absolute thing that I would always do, which is bare my soul, guts and all, and be so vulnerable and share it with the world. But to your point, not when I was in the deep, dark, hidden away hole. But when I'd sort of crawled up maybe like 3 steps of the 10-step ladder, and I poked my head up and I go, right, I can write about this now. And then I became fodder. And then it was like self-perpetuating. So then I had to continue writing about it. And it was almost like, can I outdo myself? And then I was writing about ADHD and dating. I got a column in the Telegraph. Hey, woo, yay. I'm like, all I do is go home and make bolognese for my 2 children. But no, I'm now on tourbywarehouse.com and have 25 different dating apps. Now I'm this character. All right, cool. So what's happened recently is I've discovered, and listen, I'm not angry about it, but I've discovered recently that friends, well-meaning, have sort of said, Stacey, okay? Or the things that I write, which are not for them, by the way, they're for us. Is she okay? Do you think she's all right? Should we check in on her? Well-meaning, but ever so slightly gossipy. I don't know. So I stopped talking and I didn't post anything. And I thought, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to do this. And I wrote this book and it's made me very vulnerable. And I just shut down like a little crab. And I decided I was going to do fashion. I'm just going to be fabulous. That's another mask. I spent years doing that at Elle magazine, racking up credit card debts and things that I couldn't afford. Mimi dresses, not from Vinted. That was another mask. Anyway, my point of this is that on Saturday, I was talking at this divorce conference. And at the end, the host, she said, does anyone have a question for Stacey? And 4 women stood up and they cried about my book. So then I was like, what am I doing hiding away? I was hiding away because I felt like I'd been punished for speaking about things that friends don't want to see or hear. And so my next post is going to take on this imposter and probably come up with another character. And I'm going to post that this is not for you. If you don't want to hear this, bye. If you know me and love me, but you don't want to hear this bit, bye. This is not for you. And actually Saturday, it's been 4 days. So I have been reflecting and trying not to be impulsive about just posting it straight away. I've been reflecting upon whether this is a good idea and I've decided it is. So I'm going to just front face this and go, right. So you are used to me sharing everything and I haven't been doing that. I'm going to do sharing with boundaries. And if you're following me and you don't like this, you find it uncomfortable, ciao.
I'm not even sure what is oversharing anymore. I feel like sometimes oversharing is, perhaps talking when you are really, really,
Vulnerable.
really unwell
Yeah.
and vulnerable and not doing it with an eye to your own safety and the
Yes.
safety of the people listening to you. And then we get into trauma dumping and all that sort of stuff. But also sometimes it is just sharing a story because at the heart of it, there is a universal truth. Like, I started off as an arts journalist. Like, I never thought I'd write about mental health or ADHD or infertility or any of these sorts of things. But I did because that's what you do, I think, as a writer, as a communicator, as a performer, like anybody who wants to, you're trying to connect with people and not just find your place in the world through it, but be a part of that tapestry that's helped you in all those sorts of different ways. But something that I found really challenging about perhaps the social media world that they're in is that you're only really successful if you're in one silo, if you're in one lane, which as ADHD people is just categorically not it. And I found that quite difficult because the month after my ADHD book came out, my infertility book came out due to some insane scheduling.
Right.
And then obviously that really confused people who were here because of ADHD chatter. And then I just panicked because I was like, I know that in order to make my book a success, I need to only post ADHD things for the rest of my life. And also do the thing that you can't do, which is go, here's how I can change your life in 15 seconds. And it's like, I can't, babe. I can't. So I've just shared nothing. And so I've just gone, I live on stories now because I'm like, I haven't got
Because you're
anything
almost like in a state
helpful
of,
for you because it's panic.
Yeah.
And actually, Alex, I'm really interested in this for you as well because you've got your beautiful podcast, wonderful people who've been on the podcast, some of whom are obviously around the table. But how are you coping with I am ADHD now. ADHD is all I am. Alex, A for Alex and A for ADHD.
Yeah, well, I've certainly pigeonholed myself, but intentionally. I really have done it intentionally because 2 years prior to getting my diagnosis, I did nothing but play computer games. During COVID and in the 2 years following that, I did nothing but play computer games. I was addicted to my Xbox, and the depression that came with that was unspeakable. My partner was saying at the time, she was genuinely worried about me. It was the first thing I got up, and that the only thing that would quiet my mind was turning on my Xbox. And it got to the point where I was just hated myself so much because I knew there was something inside of me that had so much more to give. My background's been in social media. The brands that I made before Alex ADHD, that gave me my focus and attention. When I sold those, there was this void that filled with anxiety. These caffeinated squirrels in my head came back. And the only thing that stopped it was my Xbox, and I got the diagnosis, and I had to do something. Otherwise, I knew the Xbox eventually would be replaced with alcohol, and I know that alcohol leads me to hospital.
Yeah.
And hospital, last time I was in hospital because of alcohol, the nurse was telling my parents, one more drink would have been fatal for me. So I had no choice but to channel my mind into something. And what so many people with ADHD are so good at is when we do channel and we do find that thing, then we can be world beating at it. I genuinely do believe. Where does imposter syndrome for you, Shappi, fall, and boundaries and?
Well, it's imposter syndrome is something that when I found a name for it, or when people talked about it, I was like, oh, right, is that what it is? But I kind of railed against it as well because, as a stand-up comedian who is a woman and not white, it was like against all expectations. So I felt quite resentful of the term imposter syndrome as well, because I had to just really, really feel like I'm in this green room with all these men. We're all, going on the same stage. I feel like an absolute, I feel like a shoe in a cupboard of frogs. Do you know what I mean? Like, don't belong there, but like doggedly staying there, despite the fact that so much of it was just sheer anxiety. And, going to schmooze and meetings and just messing it all up, like meeting like really powerful people in the comedy industry and deciding what I was going to tell them was how I died on my arse last week. And you should have seen it. I walked off to the sound of my own footsteps. I'm such an idiot. And think, oh, that's really great because I made them laugh. It's like, no, what you did was just batter yourself into the ground in front of people.
Yes.
And I was somewhere last night that was terrifying, but I just had such a great time. And I went home with the phone numbers of really powerful people in my phone. I was like, I can do it now. And some people go, oh, well, that's age. No, it's not age.
What is it?
It's understanding myself and accepting myself and not being apologetic for the way my brain is sometimes. I will forget a name. I won't forget a single thing someone told me. But if I have to introduce you to someone, very likely I'll forget your name. Things like that I felt shame around. Or I'm on stage last night hosting something and somebody had a Russian name, which for my dyslexia, no matter how many times I look at it, memorize it in the moment with the lights and all the people, I'm very likely to really mess it up. And I owned it and confidently went, how horrific to have a name to read out that's won this wonderful award. And unfortunately, my dyslexia making these letters swim. So I'm going to just ask my friend over here. And I gave my microphone to someone. And they did it. And I was like, this is me no longer apologizing for my brain and who I am, because I have other qualities. And I'm doing a psychotherapy course, as in training to be one. And I rely so much on my fellow classmates for a lot of the admin stuff. And my tutor said, and I had a lot of shame around it. My tutor said, yeah, but you give things. I was like, do I? Oh, yeah, I do. Yeah. I'm not just this little taker. But one of the things I found after doing your podcast was, for a start, the sheer amount of people that wrote to me afterwards. And it still is wild for me that I'm talking out loud about it. And I'm, oh my God, were you always there? Was everyone always there, just hiding in our shells, pretending? And the fact that it's like I'm a werewolf, and now I've met all these other werewolves that have been hiding.
That's the thing, is stepping into who you are, but it's also the societal, acceptance of it, right? And that letting go of that shame it's incredible, it's amazing, but also not dumbing yourself down.
Absolutely.
So I also deal with work things. I say, I can't run a diary. I'm very sorry. Do you have anyone who could help me? Like, just very simple things. Whereas before I'm like, right, that's it. I'm leaving the country, changing my name.
Yeah.
and you will never see me
I've
again.
walked out of jobs down the back door
I'm
because
sure.
they put me in front of a computer screen. Bye, I'm just going to the loo, never came back.
Yeah.
All the time. And
Yeah.
now I when I email, I don't use exclamation marks.
Sorry.
And I I don't know, but do you know what I mean? Like, I don't go like that thing of, I'm going to be like, I'm really sorry, I'm going to be like a bit late because of trains, or you do know what I mean? Like, I go, no, own it, right? So I don't say sorry. I say, unfortunately,
Great.
I won't be able to do this, or I haven't been able to do this on time, unfortunately. And people respond to direct. And I've learned that people aren't judging me the way I judge myself. And you kind of, this sounds really fridge magnety, but you teach people how to treat you. And I do this thing. I noticed the other day that I went out my house, forgot my keys, or forgot something, and I went back in, and no one said anything. And I thought there was a time where they would have gone, what have you forgotten this time? And I've really laid a boundary about people taking the mickey out of my scattiness, because it then forces me in a position of like, I'd forget my head if it wasn't, I'm not playing that game anymore, thank you very much. However, there is a side of all this where I was reading, my partner, Mark Steele, has written a book. And there was this bit in his book that he wrote about me. And he described me as, it was lovely, but one of the things he said is like, and then she'll go into a bakery and then come out with a woman who, as the woman was wrapping her sandwich, Shappi convinced her to go to Glastonbury with her, that sort of thing. And I was like, yeah, that is what I used to do. I used to open my door, instant friendships, go to Glastonbury with someone that I never saw again afterwards. There is a part of me that misses that, misses the chaos I brought. I don't want it in my life anymore because it was chaos. And I feel a bit like Tarzan. You know, like how Tarzan was a baby raised by chimps. He didn't know he wasn't a chimp. And his chimpy friends didn't know that he wasn't a chimp. He just thought, I'm a bit different, so I can't swing on the vines. I'll make a ladder, though. And, you know, it's not that you can't walk on all fours. You just don't want to. And then they find him. They take him. He finds out he's human. And then, you know, he falls in the film, Tarzan the Legend of Greystoke. They bring all these beautiful society women, and he's like, I've been bonking chimps all my adult life. and bad though it was, there's a part of me that misses bonking chimps. And sometimes I remember my bonking chimps days and goes, oh, some of it was fun.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm also now just mentally combining that with the Disney version and therefore Minnie Driver, who I feel is spiritually one of us, if not necessarily one of us. I had this moment the other night where I was coming back from a late shift and thinking about things that you do versus don't do anymore. The late shift finishes at 11 o'clock, and I, now that I don't drink anymore, cannot function late in the evening. But I can now because that's what I have to do because I'm doing a late shift. But then I got to the tube and the tube just wasn't running. So then I had to go somewhere else to go and find how to get home. And I ended up at Victoria Station at nearly midnight. And not even a Proust, what's a rush that you get from a flashback to something horrible, not like a lovely Madeleine biscuit or something. I got the biggest rush to maybe December years ago when I would have panicked having been to like a Christmas party, drunk too much, tried not to drink too much because I'm very tall and therefore it's more noticeable if I'm flapping around, you know, balancing around people. But I would still at some point have ended up at that station feeling simultaneously very drunk and very sober and full of panic.
Shame. Yeah.
And all of those feelings came straight back to me. But I was sober and I knew the train that I was getting on. And yeah, I did. Did I want a McDonald's? I didn't really, but it was just because I had 15 minutes till my train. So I went and queued up for the McDonald's and then just went and sat on my train. And I was just like, I did that for so many years because I didn't know that there was another option.
Yeah.
I just knew that I needed to try and, you know, pretend to, or at least pretend that I knew what I was doing, but I just didn't. And when we talk about acceptance, I think that is something that is so key to specify what that actually means, because it's not accepting, oh, well, I guess this is my life now, and then just, become really passive. It's accepting, but this is just the way that my brain works. This is the way that I need to deal.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be the funny person. I don't want to play this particular role in X, Y, and Z situation. But also, if I am going to a party, I am probably going to leave by 10 because unless I drink 500 coffees, in which case backfiring, I just can't do that anymore.
Take all your meds
Do
in
you,
one go.
are you able to, because I often just leave parties. I'm trying to get better at it now, but I often just leave without saying goodbye, like you mentioned when you left that job. But the consequence of that is like the anxiety that comes the next day of people thinking that I was rude. I think we mentioned this on
We
our
spoke
recording.
about it last time, I think, of like, I get in, I think like, in the clip, I think I could say like the glitch almost. I don't know if someone put that in the comments, but it's like you're going, and then suddenly you go, oh no, I'm empty, my brain's gone, and then it's like trying to think about, okay, well, who do I need to say bye to? How do I say bye? And how do I explain that I'm fine? I'm just out of charge. I just need to go. And then you end up either just like sitting there. You can't leave because you don't want to say bye, so you're just either there awkward, not saying bye, or you just end up leaving and then feeling awkward the next day that you didn't say bye to anybody.
But then,
The thing about that as well, because I'm like you in that since I found out about ADHD and understood myself, I'm not the last one to leave parties. I'm often the first. And again, with not drinking as well, just like really cherish that sobriety of like climbing into my bed knowing I'm going to wake up in the morning and not feel like hitting myself. But with that feeling of people thinking I'm rude, I say goodbye to the host. And if people think I'm rude, it's a their problem, as my son would say. That's a them issue. And last night I was at this event and some people that I absolutely adored, I went to find them and they'd gone. And I thought, oh, I don't think they're rude. I think they're tired.
Just needed to go.
And then I thought, how much do people actually think I'm rude or give it a second thought?
Yeah.
Than me being so terrified of this, I don't know, what's the catastrophe if someone does think I'm rude?
Yeah.
Learning that nothing's personal goes two ways. So if they take it personally, then what can I do? Simply can't live this tiny snippet of life that we're gifted.
Interesting this. So I was going to ask you how you're going to deal with the Christmas party season with that in mind, like, my battery's dead, I don't want to go. But you don't, do you not sit there in a kind of frozen state anymore, or are you able to get yourself up and out? Because there's a lot going on for you, I imagine.
Yeah, I think. So I will generally, like, where I can, I'll ask to take a +1 to things. Okay. So then that's like an emergency blank. So first of all, I think it drains you less because it's like you're not doing that panic of like, oh, is anyone going to talk to me? How am I going to talk? You've got like your safety person that, like, if you end up talking to other people, that's a bonus, but you've got like your safety person. But then also I think that's maybe helpful when it is time to leave, that they can sort of lead the goodbyes, even if you're, because I think that's the awkward thing is like in your brain, you're like, am I going to, but you're doing that lingering thing where they're having a conversation, you're like,
oh my God. So that's when the alcohol comes in handy.
So I think it's like, even if someone else can like do that decision, that they can make the jump, then I can still say bye. It's just that I'm not having to do all of the like processing as well.
Do you know what I do now? I just go, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I've got to go.
Yeah,
bye. That's what I do. I just do the arm, like, bye. I'm so sorry to interrupt. No, carry on.
Yeah, don't have a conversation.
And then I go. I'm able to do that now.
But also, these things are actually they're part of the social. That they have names: French exit, Irish exit.
Yeah. What's an Irish exit?
It's exactly the same as a French exit,
but drunk.
But I think it's that thing. As long as you say goodbye to the host and go, I'm not going to say goodbye to everybody, but I've had a lovely time, loads of love, speak to you soon, and then off to the tube. Wonderful.
Yeah. Something I do as well is I'll send like something that I've got quite good at is like I'll always message someone the day after, being like, so lovely to see you last night. And then I think even if I haven't said bye to them, then I still know that it's not on bad terms. It's like, oh, sorry, I didn't get a chance to say bye. I had a lovely time seeing you.
Yeah.
Right.
And people don't walk around to pick holes in your behaviour, but it can feel like that.
It feels like it.
And I had this meeting with somebody because I agreed to do this event in Norway with some political bigwigs talking about democracy.
Wow.
And I am a stand-up comedian. Hello. So I thought, I'll do that. That'd be brilliant. So I thought, I'm actually going to prepare, which is something I can do now. And I made a meeting with a Russian lecturer to help me get a background of what we were going to talk about, right? It was brilliant. And I went to the university. And it was a room like this, a meeting room, which I'm not really used to because I don't have, like an office job.
It's
I don't have
more
formal
intimidating,
meetings.
isn't it?
Yeah. And we walked in and it was a long table and I sat here and then the head of the table was there, all chairs. And he stood opposite me, wondering where to sit. And I went, well, would you like to sit here? And he said, I'm not sure. And I was like, oh, wow, this wasn't a split-second thing for him. He's really thinking about where to sit. And I said, well, I can move if you want, or you can just sit here. And he said, well, I've got issues with hierarchy, so I'm not sure. And then he said something amazing. He said, I'm socially awkward, so I'm just going to sit here opposite you. And I said, I am so glad that you said that out loud. Now I understand. What a brilliant thing. And he was young. He was only about 30, like early 30s. And I thought, yes, this is the younger generation who are, no, I'm socially awkward. I don't want to sit next to you. It's weird. It's too close. I just met you. Fine.
Yeah.
And my
Disarms the anxiety.
reaction was, yes, that makes sense.
That would never have happened even a couple of years ago.
Oh,
How did you all feel today, knowing that you were coming to a room full of neurodivergents? What was the pre-recording feeling? Anxious or excitement?
Yeah, I think more excitement. I think more. I actually think I felt more relaxed for it being in a group rather than like a one-on-one podcast, because it's like, well, I can dip in and out as and when. It's not like that I have to be on mode the whole time.
I noticed that I didn't ask you who else was going to be here. You just said, are you free on this day to do this? And I was like, yeah. And I think I messaged you, go, have you noticed I didn't ask?
Yes, you did.
And I'd never have noticed that before. I would have just gone scramble. But I thought, oh, I love that I don't ask, because I have ADHD and whoever's there, I'm going to roll with it.
Exactly.
Because that's what I'm good at. That's my forte, is rolling with it. And I was really happy. I've not been disappointed.
Merci.
I think the spontaneity of it is really lovely.
Yeah.
And that's not something we necessarily get to do when you have to think about content creation or events or writing or, I don't know, just then organising, just being a person and everything else like that. And I think that's just been a real joy, is being able to come and not have to worry about the points that you want to get across or this real information. Thinking about the anxiety, though, I saw this really interesting report of a study from a week or so ago. I've obviously immediately forgotten the name of the person who did it. It was a woman leading the study, I think, but saying that actually one of the ways that people can sort of keep a lot of their more like chaotic octopus ADHD traits in check, if you like, is just through chronic anxiety, perfectionism, the making sure that you've done everything 3 times. When we were thinking about parties, I was like, oh yes, I'd always write a thank you letter afterwards, partly because I love stationery, I really love it, but also because
Amazing, you posted it.
Yeah, well,
yeah, that's what I was thinking. I've got so many unposted thank you letters.
Oh, I can't go to the post office. I can only get the stamps from the co-op because the post office is horrible. But and actually now that the price of stamps is so extreme, I probably can't even do that. But still, just that idea of sort of keeping everything going through either hyperfocus, interest, or having lots of varied things to keep you going, or just through the anxiety of people are going to find me out, or I need to be there. I need to just think constantly about this thing because otherwise I won't arrive late and then people will think badly of me. I think that's honestly why I initially found giving up drinking quite challenging, was because it just, for me, shone a light onto how much social anxiety I was covering with that. I was so panicky about like, oh, I'll go to a party and people will worry that that I'm not drinking. I didn't care about that at all. Whereas now, thinking about parties and how we organise them, I think there's a real weighing up to be done in a way that I think some of the conversation around the concept of boundaries on social media hasn't really made clear, is that when you make a decision, there will always be a consequence or an outcome. And so if you decide not to go to a friend's engagement party, as I did immediately after giving up drinking because you're having a panic attack, then there might be a consequence down the line. I was very lucky in the fact that my friend was extremely forgiving about it. But again, if I would much rather decide to go to a party, even if it's for like an hour or two, and still be like, I've been here, I've had a lovely time, this is great, please enjoy the rest of your party, thank you so much for inviting me, than just ghosting them altogether or not turning up.
And then
because,
the days after, oof.
Faking your own death. Honestly. Building up just the Wonder Stuff lyrics, building up problems to the size of a cow. I remember once I heard my mum phone her friend who she was due to have dinner with that night. And my mum said, I was so looking forward to seeing you. But honestly, Lida, I'm so tired. I can barely move. I just want to flop on the sofa. It's like, wow.
The honesty.
You
I've been
did
run over
that.
by a train while trying to rescue a cat that has some chewing gum stuck in its whiskers. And then what? No, just the truth.
And also, I when people do that because they do become unregulated and they are masking and they're not confident, and you see through their lie. And before I'd be like, "You're so lying." Now I think, "Oh, you poor thing."
That you feel like you
That
have
must
to
have
lie,
taken a lot of stress for you to, and you're not going, "Ha ha ha! I've hoodwinked her." You're going, "Oh my God, she's going to hate me." And then it's really hard to then say, "By the way, I don't hate you. Everything's fine."
Yeah.
Do you ever get sort of these big intrusive thoughts, hoping some disaster will happen that will get you out of an event that you're anxious about?
Yeah, I remember being in cars, going to comedy clubs out of town when I was newer, and always having been so terrified of the fact that I was going to go on stage and make people laugh or not. I never knew whether I was going to die or smash it. Now I'm so much more emotionally regulated around it, right? And I used to just be in a car and just go, just a gentle little smash.
Yes.
Yeah, not a disaster, not that anything bad will actually happen, but it will just get me out of it.
No one's going to die,
Yeah.
but what an excuse no one can argue with. Had a crash, bit of whiplash.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, actually, this is really overwhelming for me. When I look back on it, I just think, how on earth? But now I'm fine. Now I love it. Now I really enjoy it. Everyone would say to you, the older comics the more experienced comics would go, just enjoy it. How? Because I can't enjoy being in my own skin, let alone being in my skin in front of strangers. But it was like...
it's one of the bravest things to do, I think.
It's not. It's mad. It's like bungee jumping or jumping out of an aeroplane or snowboarding when you can't snowboard. It's you don't know if you're going to die or not.
It's a topic
that thrill.
It comes up time and time again on the podcast. It's that separation, that distinction between anxiety, which is just like, oh, that's scary, I don't want to do that, between the internal, genuine fear, which can often cause a shutdown.
Yeah.
And that when it's in those moments when I do a lot of public speaking and I'm driving to a gig or whatever, and some of them really makes me shut down to the point where I'm in my car thinking, I want to have a car crash because that will give me a legitimate excuse to then tell the event that I'm going to. That's the insanity of it.
Well, I have a trick for you. So I didn't answer the question of how I felt coming here. So when I used to have panic attacks at work, very silently, which are actually really, really terrible. So you're seated at a table like this. I was always fine talking to, just like doing some, a talk or whatever. But at a table in a boardroom, having to present to bosses and things, it would always start my palms in my hands. And then I could feel the top lip go. And I thought, here we go. And someone once said, if you feel curiosity, you can't feel fear. So when I came here, I approached it with pure curiosity about all of you. And it's true. They cannot exist at the same time. You cannot feel curious and fearful at the same time, but you really do. So you're doing that. I, did or whatever. And then I have to keep bringing myself back to curiosity. So if it's somebody I was intimidated by, I would look at them and think, I wonder why they chose to wear that today, to myself.
Was this my mum?
Yeah. What's wrong with your hair, dear? Then I found myself, and I didn't have the panic attacks anymore. It's amazing. So being curious about the situation you're going into,
Noticing
it takes
things.
training.
Because
But
noticing things brings you in the moment. And and fear takes you out at that moment. And that's the thing I found with, it's been huge. It's made a huge impact on my stand-up comedy, finding out about ADHD and being open about it on this, platforms like yours that you realize that you have a tribe. And now stand-up comedy is no longer a extreme sport, but it's a craft. And that's taken me years. And now I'm so excited and enthusiastic about the connection I've made with the audience and, they like this and let's go with that. And even in the moment on stage, I'm like, I can name how I'm feeling. It's like, that didn't land. What happened there? And I'd seen over the years other comics be able to do this. I was like, how are they so relaxed? And now I'm like, there we are. And nothing bad's going to happen if it tanks.
No. What do you think? What's your reaction to people who say, "Oh, I'd like to be a stand-up comic"? So, for example, everyone says to me, "Oh, I'd like to write a book. I'm going to write a book," or "I'm writing a book." "Oh, are you? How many pages in are you?" Well, I've done like the intro paragraph. So you know what I mean, like that idea
People
that
think you pull it out of a hat.
That's what I mean. Like, I would be like, I think what you do is, I can't actually imagine it. I can't. Standing up on stage, I can't imagine it. Like, and delivering just the judgment. Oh my God.
The people that really want to be stand-up comics are quiet.
Yeah.
They're the quiet ones.
Yeah,
we always get asked, were you the class clown? No, the class clown. The class clown was a horrible bully. That was the class clown. It was the quiet, nerdy one that never got picked for games that is the most likely to be a comic, because they're the ones that are quietly observing everything. They're the ones that are not being seen. So as adults, they're like, fuck you, I'm going to be seen. Thank you. And that is the drive. And sometimes, not for everyone, I know, but sometimes we'll go, people think I should be a comic. I'm like, that's nice. I tell myself now, you're making chit chat.
Okay.
You're making
chit
chit chat. Yeah, you're making books are different. Books are more difficult. The amount of times, since I've written books, people say, "Oh, did you get a book deal because you're a comic?" So, do you know how many no's I get before I get a yes? I'll get 100 no's before I get a maybe for anything. You know,
carry on.
Yeah, and carry on, because I don't know what else to do. And if I am still, I just want to claw my
We spoke about that, didn't we? This idea that actually, as people, as neurodivergent people, we've got this huge amount of fear and a reluctance to do something, just, popping into a party. And yet we really put ourselves out there like no one else. And it's like, okay, how? Why?
What do you think compels us to do that? I think
it's just talking about the drive. I don't know.
Where does that come from? Is it a sort of feeling of inadequacy? So you're sort of driven by an anxiety. You don't want to come across as not enough?
I don't have the answer.
I think sometimes it's almost, I think we're sort of phoenixes almost. We're like giant legendary birds, obviously, so more giant than others, but who thrive in the flames. But it's when there aren't any flames and you just have to go around your birdie business that becomes really difficult.
We're halfway through the episode now, and I know what you're all thinking. Where the hell is the midway sponsor we've all been patiently waiting for, Alex? Well, thank you for reminding me. A word from our sponsor, Stacey. I talk to a lot of my fellow ADHD friends that take the prescribed stimulants like Adderall or Vyvanse, and they always say the same thing, that the afternoon energy crashes, sleep interruptions, and irritability these meds cause can really deter them from enjoying the benefits that these stimulants provide. So much so that it makes them question taking them altogether. A close entrepreneurial friend of mine even came off meds entirely because he was literally and figuratively tired from the negative effects associated with these stimulants, until I urged him to try Stacey, which helped him, in his own words, correct his natural chemical balance, in turn helping with deeper sleep, even out his energy levels and promoting a calmer mood. Well, I'm happy to let you know that with Stacey, you don't have to choose anymore. Stacey is the first of its kind supplement that you take with your stimulant. It contains naturally derived vitamins, minerals, adaptogens, and antioxidants that level out the less desirable effects of stimulants, so you can take it without suffering from the downsides. It's been precision formulated to target the root causes of those downsides by regulating dopamine levels, warding off cortisol spikes, and targeting oxidative stress, all with ingredients that come straight from nature. Less brain fog, less jitters, increased focus, more sustained energy throughout the day, and less stress. If you take stimulants, why wouldn't you boost your brain health with Stasis? ADHD Chatter listeners can get 20% off with the link in the description. Try it for yourself. And maybe I'm biased, but there is one other proven way to relieve stress, and that's by carrying on watching the episode.
I never feel more in the moment than when there is a genuine, honest-to-God crisis, usually involving somebody who's injured or somebody who needs help or a purpose or something. It's like my brain just suddenly goes completely quiet, focusing on the job at hand. The amount of time that I can drive myself into a frothing state of frenzy because I have one tiny thing to do on my Google task list and I don't want to do it or I can't start it. I had to read a flipping book last weekend. The meal that I made of that, I knew that I would do it eventually, and this is where the difference is now. This is the acceptance thing again. I know that whatever I have to do, I'm going to do, and that sort of helps in a way. It's just sometimes the pilot light for starting the little tasks that, you know, aren't noble or aren't filled with purpose. They're just like, do your admin for your taxes, read this book for tomorrow.
Yeah.
All those sorts of read your emails properly from the start to the end, as opposed to just
Skipping in the
burst
middle.
through paragraphs at the beginning.
Well, the not reading emails is how I've ended up going to Norway and doing a panel discussion about democracy, because I thought it was a comedy panel show. I didn't read anything else. And also I've lost money because I don't read emails. Once I was offered, I don't do any influencer stuff, but after I was on I'm a Celebrity, I got offered £10,000 for one post about trainers. I was like, 10 grand for one post about trainers. That's all I read. I didn't read that it was a pelvic floor trainer. I was assuming running trainers. So my agent said, well, they're in the post to you. And this pelvic floor trainer turned up, and I thought it just been sent to me in error. I was asking my neighbours if anyone had a package that had gone astray. So I opened it, and it was a pelvic floor trainer. So I put a silly post up saying, oh, wow, at least I won't piss myself when I jump. And the company phoned my agent and said, we're not paying you that money. Can you get it to take it down?
Funny.
Yeah, 10 grand I lost.
Oh my goodness.
And did the trainers go with an outfit?
That's right. It really sort of says how I saw myself and how the industry saw me, because I thought, oh yeah, it's because I'm like a middle-aged mum that still runs half marathons. But no, they think I have a weak bladder. Yeah, that's just one example. There's been so many things I've said yes to. I once said yes to a job, and it was never sing along a Sound of Music. I was such a new comedian. I didn't know what sing a song, a sound of, but whatever it was. It's a Sound of Music. It's played on a big screen, and the audience sing along with all the songs.
Oh, that sounds true.
And as the host, I didn't know until I got there that I actually had to sing to open the show with a song. I was like, okay. I didn't say I don't sing. So I'm just there going, raindrops on roses and whiskers on kittens, right, and not remembering any of it. And then I went, right, and there's all these diehard fans dressed as brown paper packages tied up with string.
No.
And I said, now lose yourselves in the Alps of Switzerland. And they all went, Austria. And I was just the kid at school that had wet themselves. And things like that early on in my career happened all the time.
I was doing a red carpet interview when I was at a film magazine in one of my first jobs. And we were never sent along to see the films beforehand. Why would you? So it was to my absolute horror that I turned up to Hollywoodland, a film I still have not seen to this day, and was then told, oh, Kat, you've got one-on-ones for your magazine. And I was like, oh, sorry, what?
Oh, my God. Stressful.
I went upstairs to hastily try and Google the plot of this film on my little ancient Sony Ericsson film, at which point somebody said, oh, Kat, here's Bob for you. Bob Hoskins then comes and sits down in front of me.
Amazing.
Anyway, I managed to sort of stress dream my way through that. When Ben Affleck and Adrian Brody turned up, I was just like, I've got nothing I can do here. And
this is how.
And it was also one of those awful Horse and Hound in Notting Hill things. And I think I asked Adrian Brody what it was like shooting with Ben Affleck, and he said very sweetly, well, of course, we didn't have any scenes together, but he's a very nice man.
Oh, God.
And by the end of it, I was just so thrilled to get through it that this was still, to this day, the only time in my life that I've just asked each of them for a photograph with them. I never have photographs with interviews, but I was just like, I've made it through.
Could they tell? Were they helping you?
There are some really crap journalists on the film circuit.
Right.
Mostly in the UK, thank God, although me at that point, clearly. So I think, unfortunately, if you are in any kind of promotional setup, then people will be used to being asked the worst questions in the history of ever. But largely, I think they think that you have at least read the plot summary.
The thing is, the missing attention to detail is something that I forgive myself for all the time. Like, I once turned up to a wedding a week early, right? All things like that. And because, like, if you
weren't the bride, were you?
Oh God, that would have been it. But it's I was going to tell you something, but I forgot what it was, which I also have
Attention to detail.
Attention to detail. I was once a presenter. I always wanted to be a presenter when I was younger, and the Open University gave me my big break. And I was to interview this woman about early surgery instruments. She was a historian, and I had to talk to her about like what they used to have to, cut tonsils out in the olden days and all of this. And another thing later on I was going to do was the history of coffee. So I got all this muddled up. So we met the surgery woman, historian, in a coffee shop chain called Patisserie Valerie. And I sat talking to this woman, and I thought she was Valerie. And I sat talking to this historian saying, my mum always got our birthday cakes from you. And we just loved them. It was just always the best. And she was just like, okay, backing away, like just thinking this woman's mad. But so, because it wasn't, not only was it missing attention to detail, but not having the confidence to tell people I wasn't sure what was going on.
Yeah.
So I spoke to this woman as though she was a coffee shop owner, and she was and again, that's just a drop in the ocean of inappropriately turning up for things and saying odd things and thinking I'm speaking to the person I'm not speaking to. Oh, there's been a lot of that. Blagging it, but not really getting away with it. And I think there's a load of people who just have met me in the past and gone, oh yeah, I've met Shappi Khorsandi. I think she's a little bit simple.
The attention to detail thing really hit me then. In my first year of university, I impulsively spent half my student loan on this giant freezer. It was about 6 foot, this huge freezer, and I filled it with pizzas from the supermarket. And I made a Facebook page called Quick Pizza. And the idea was if a student wanted a pizza in the middle of the night, they would message the page, and I'd throw a pizza in the oven. And I ended up having 4 people cycling around Oxford delivering pizzas in the middle of the night to students. But the university shut me down because I didn't have a food safety hygiene certificate. It's that attention to detail that I missed.
That's an amazing business.
That was before Deliveroo as well. I should have stuck to it.
Deliveroo.
But it's that attention to detail piece. It was the admin that I lacked.
Yeah. It's the last 10% bit.
But
it's
also
always
the problem
everything
solving. I've got a freezer, it's too big. Tell you what, I'll make this a business.
Well, you bought the freezer for the business, right?
Yeah. It cost about £400. Huge freezer. We've all been on our...
Oh, I thought you'd because I would have accidentally bought a freezer that big because I won't have looked at the dimensions of my room. I bought this shed that was just like one person can stand up in it, tiny shed, and that's not what I needed because I don't measure things. And I've bought a bed that's too big for my room before, that kind of stuff. I think that's ingenious.
What do you think are, I suppose it'd be good, interesting...
If I had attention to detail, I don't think I would have had my 2 children.
Oh my God.
What do you think are the most common themes? And I suppose it'd be interesting to ask you, Ellie, because the work you do, speaking to many people, many neurodivergent people, what do you think are the most common themes that come up amongst the community?
Ooh, I think a lot. I think a lot of shared experiences. I think for a lot of people, it is that always feeling like the alien and then suddenly realizing that they're not the odd one out, and then always, feeling different and not really knowing why. And I think that thing of just like always feeling like life is so difficult. I think that it's like you're always doing everything on hard mode all of the time. I think that's
Hard mode.
Yeah. It's all. I think that's like something that I think that's what I get really frustrated with as well. Is like some days it's just like I just wish that I could have one day where everything would run smoothly. Like I just wish everything wasn't so difficult all of the time. Like the simplest things take up so much effort and so much brain space. And I think that's something that a lot of people sort of like resonate with. I don't know. I think there's so many different things. I think another thing is like that there's so many different parts of people's experience that they don't even realize are like related to ADHD or related to neurodivergence or related to autism. They just think that that's like a them thing or it's their experience. And it's like actually so many people have so many shared experiences that are all like sort of like related to being ADHD in some way, that they've just like never tied it to that. They've just always thought it was like a them thing.
Yeah, like, oh, they're stupid. They're not good enough.
Yeah.
They're clumsy old me, daft me. It's like bringing my dog here today. I didn't figure that out. So I had to get the dog. I was driving from Margate, and then I was with actually someone I've just started dating. And, you know, that's kind of, not only did he see me without my eyebrows, but I was like, and I've got to explain to him that I've got to go to this podcast, but I'm quite sure that the restaurant won't let the dog in. But where does the dog go? So he went home, and then he came back for me, and he is meeting me with the dog. Can I tell you what that caused me? It caused me to go through Woolwich, where I've never been, to cross like practically a dual carriageway, in Celine high-heeled boots, Phoebe Philo, not him, get into the station, really like confused, this looks like a spaceship, get off at the wrong stop, and then just this whole catalogue of disasters because I hadn't thought through, how am I going to get the dog to someone else? And then he sorted it out for me. I had to go drop the dog. He dropped the dog. The dog's fine. I'm going to meet him at 3:00 at Victoria. It's now 3:30, right? Okay, fine. But I apologise for it because when I was married, I would do things like that all the time, not with a dog, but, you know, replace that with a child, replace that with... And I would just go, I can't tell him. Oh, my God. You know, had it been the olden days, well, I wouldn't be on this podcast, but had it been the olden days, the dog would have been smuggled down my blazer and I'd have been, you know, I'm pregnant. What's wrong?
With these situation like that, I always think, well, surely they're on top of it. They would have said if it's dramatic and purple. And that's a mistake I always make, is I assume that other people are on top of my things. So, for example, I'm in touring in Winchester this weekend, right? And I had said to my tour manager about 6 weeks ago that that's my old uni town. I think I might stay the night there. And long story short, I'm not staying the night there. I want to come home. But because he's an organised person, he'd already booked the hotel room. And I was like, well, of course he did, because that's what I told him. He's not going to say to himself, yes, but it's Shappi. And in 6 weeks, she'll have changed her mind 17 times about staying the night. And I thought, right, I've got to be on top of that. Yeah. So if anyone needs a hotel room in Winchester, on Friday night, there's one going. But a million things like that, assuming that someone else is on top of it. And part of my growing with this is understanding that, yeah, I've got ADHD, but I really have to take responsibility, because I have learned through not knowing I have it to rely on other people so much that I can change that. I can change that, and I can, oh my God, I'm going to say it, be a grown-up.
I think there's like the line as well where I think a lot of people sort of go to they think that unmasking means like, I can't do this thing, so I won't do this thing. I won't, because it's like we've spent our whole lives forcing ourselves to like try and overcompensate to do all of these things. And then you figure out, oh, I've got ADHD. But then I think there's almost like a phase where it's like, oh, I've got ADHD, so I can't do this and I can't do that. And I think actually, no, it's somewhere in the middle of that, of like, it's not forcing yourself to do things even though they're difficult, but it is, I've got ADHD, so this thing is more difficult for me. So how can I find ways around to be able to do it? I think that's like the bit where some people get lost of like, it's like, you do need to forgive yourself and accept where you are, but that doesn't mean that you should, that's putting yourself in a different box of going, I can't do any of those things. It's like, no, you can't, or you find it more difficult to do them in the traditional way, but it doesn't mean that those things don't matter to you. Like, it doesn't mean that you're never going to be a good friend. You just have to find different ways of communicating to your friends, or you're never going to stay organised. You just have to find different ways to stay organised, or people to support you, or whatever it might be. I think that's a really tricky, where people go into the box of like, I'm never going to be able to do any of those things. I'm like, no, you will. You just have to find the ways that work for you. I think it's quite like jarring as well of like, it feels quite minimizing because, like, I don't know, like my book, for example, I get messages that like, oh, I could never write a book because of my ADHD is so bad that I could never write a book. And I'm like, well, there's lots of people with ADHD who have written books, and that doesn't mean that everyone should be able to write a book, because not everyone who doesn't have ADHD could write a book either. It's not just, you know, and it wasn't that I just woke up one day and magically wrote this book. There was a lot of work, there was a lot of support, there was a lot of accommodating, there was a lot of self-forgiveness that went into that process. And I do think there's like, that box that people get stuck in of like, yes, we should be more kind to ourselves. We should let ourselves like accept that we're going to find some things more difficult, and accept that some things are just too much for us. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try and find ways around that as well.
That's something
Absolutely,
I feel like really comes out from social media in a bad way, actually. I have a huge amount of time for all of the knowledge that's being shared, all of the experience that's being shared, but I do think that there is an element of it that is really enabling a sort of learnt helplessness in people who have been recently diagnosed. It's like, it's not your fault that you couldn't peel an apple. It's because you've got ADHD. And it's like, my God, that cannot be the answer for everything. So otherwise we're never going to get
I think
anything done.
social media can really infantilize people in that respect. I really hear what you're saying there, because there's a difference between talking meaningfully to someone about your ADHD, and then there's something else going online and saying, I can't do this because I've got this. Well, it's not because you don't speak for every person with a divergence. And so it's for me, sometimes when I come across someone like that and everything is block, I think, oh, this is not engagement about it. No.
I think it's about finding that middle ground of like, yes, you are disabled, but also you have power. Like, you can like find the balance. I don't know, I think it's really hard to say it in a way that's not gonna like come across wrong, but I think it is that balance of like, yes, some things are more difficult, yes, you face more challenges, yes, you face more barriers, but also that doesn't mean that you're stuck in this box of nothingness forever. Like, you can find different ways out of it.
You know, when people say to me all the time, but you've written books and you do stand-up comedy and you're doing all this, but it's made you who you are. It's got you to where you are today. And I find that also problematic, because I kind of feel you don't need to make me feel okay.
Yeah.
That is a conversation stopper. That isn't someone that's talking to me with curiosity. I'm not going to go, yes, queen, I've got this. I'm like, you've not seen me with my head down the toilet puking up because I've got a work deadline. You haven't seen all the disgusting, ugly parts, the shame, and all of that. And then now I'm meant to go, yes, everyone. No, it's not like that. Every person with every complexity has their own battles. And it's just not black and white like you
think
present
ADHD
it sometimes.
Do you think ADHD content on social media will be more policed and enforced in a way that regulated? Because there is a lot of, like you alluded to, content that infantiles it.
I've got to correct. Well, I'm really worried that what I said about infantilizing has come out wrong. I meant the whole of social media can sometimes bring out, and I wonder if I'm just picking a minority of people that have irritated me, when discussion is just, I meant it in the context of social media or everything. When people are having political discussions, there is no layered
it's like inability to have nuance, I think, because everything's in a 60-second segment.
That's what I meant. It's the nuance isn't there. So it's like, so you're that and you're that. You are the sum total of this comment that I have chosen to take this way. That's what I meant about infantilizes, because then it's just stops conversation. It stops curiosity. Do you know what? I think I'm really thinking about Twitter, rest in peace. With the ADHD hashtag I've lost my keys and people making content, I look at that and I think, well, that's bound to happen. That's bound to happen. But the people, like with everything, when people say to me, oh God, everyone thinks they've got ADHD now, I think, do they though? And also, the people who are struggling will be seeing between the cracks of all of that stuff, I hope. And if you know in yourself that it's not just about losing keys. And some of those things, I think, like with a lot of other things on the internet, we end up giving the things that kind of irritate us the most concentration, the most volume. And that's across the board with anything, whether it's like, you're a right-wing person and all the people that are right-wing are the, ultra right-wing people. So then you haven't got a voice and everyone thinks you're like them.
I think there is a real issue here that has been for ages, actually, particularly since the rise of like populism, is that we do need to engage our grown-up brains. And that can be really difficult when engaging our grown-up brains means having to deal with a lot of stuff that is like beyond our pay grade and that we can't fix, and yet which is being beamed into our phones, our homes, our kids and everything else like that. It's really, really hard. But that, I think, is where that curiosity that we were talking about earlier has to come in. So if somebody is asking you a stupid question, then that's fine. You can come back with that with curiosity. But then if there is somebody who is just extremely bad faith, I don't think there is necessarily any point in engaging with that, having made the mistake of doing so. I think that is a point at which you just shut it down and move it on. I follow a lot of Huskies on Instagram, honestly. And I think that we don't all have to become 24-hour news journalists.
Yeah.
I mean, one of my hats is literally being a 24-hour news journalist. But when I'm not doing that, I park all that away and I don't think about it again until my shift starts and I have to catch up on what on earth has been happening. Because we cannot be all-knowing, all-consuming, all-seeing, but it's very tempting to become all-judging. And I think when that happens, and I certainly know that I feel I need some time away, not just from social media, but just like in whatever the real world means to me at that time, is when I start thinking about turning my personal social media feed, which is an absolute hot mess and is not coherent and is not beautifully curated and is not just one thing, because I'm not just one thing. And when I start thinking, oh, I need to become a completely different person to who I am, that's when it's time to step away.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've had people say to me, you really need to sort out your Instagram because you want to make your brand and blah blah blah. And mine is all scatterbrained. And I one day I'm in the mood to do something good. Other days I do some absolute nonsense. And I haven't got anyone to do. I've tried to hire people to do it for me, but I can't delegate. I don't know how to do any of that. And I'm like, there you go. That's not me. That's all right. I'm going to leave planet Earth having a really messy Instagram page. That's okay. Tell you what I get sad about is when I realise how impatient I have been towards people who are neurodivergent and not understood. And now I realise that I've seen something in them that I didn't like in myself. Like if somebody kept interrupting conversations, she's so annoying. And now I realise that no, she probably couldn't regulate. And also I've gone so deep into healing and also psychotherapy training that I had this issue with a work person writing me a really snotty email, unnecessarily snotty email. And a friend of mine who is not in our world said, oh my God, aren't these people regulated? I completely assumed she meant emotionally regulated. I said, yeah, I think she really did. She was very reactive there, wasn't there? I think she's got probably a lot on her plate, a lot going on, and probably in a little bit of overwhelm. And I realised she meant a regulating body.
Does anyone have any funny stories about how their ADHD has shown up recently?
Oh, yes. So today we're filming in a beautiful restaurant in Soho. So I just assumed, I was like, well, it's bold to have a podcast in which we're all eating. I mean, that'll be a sensory disaster for an ADHD audience. But I was so excited about coming to the restaurant that I didn't have any breakfast and I didn't have any lunch. And I then had to ask Alex to get me a bread basket so that I didn't actually pass out. Because my husband tells me that if I basically have not had lunch or anything, it's like watching a plane in free fall. And sort of like happy. Oh God, awful. But yeah, delicious bread basket, Alex. Thanks
good.
so much.
My RSD is like I've left you all starving and I feel terrible.
Oh no.
I didn't bring pajamas with me on my trip to London, so I'm pajamaless for the. And I always forget something really important. But it's always pajamas at the moment.
Good heating, 'cause it's freezing as well.
Well, I just slept in like a baggy t-shirt.
I tell you what I did. This is quite an ADHD thing where my daughter's teacher, there was something about she hadn't covered her books properly or something. It's just something so silly she came home with. And I wrote an unnecessarily long email to the entire school staff, everyone from like the receptionist to all her form teachers and the head teacher, describing rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria in such detail, like unnecessarily so. Like I forgot I was doing it. I forgot where I was. I thought I was writing a chapter of a book. It was so long. And saying that when sometimes if she gets teary, it's not because she's sad. So it's not if you console someone who is crying immediately, often that can feel that you're asking them to stop crying and invalidate. So and there, ping, sent it off, and they sent a little message back saying, thank you. We actually have no worries about her at all. And they left it at that. And I went, I went into hyper focus with that email, and that's okay. They might think I'm a little bit of a weirdo. They don't get me. That's okay. I think that is something that's changed hugely in me, is you think I'm a weirdo.
That sums it up, actually. I spent my entire life trying to hide the fact that I was 6'1", not a model size, ginger, had broken all my teeth in a horrible bike accident, was really nerdy, just to try and like pass off as a human being. And the idea of like now, my tiny violin will be out shortly, but the idea that I can now just be like, yeah, but I am a bit weird, and that's fine. As long as I am, reasonably socially acceptable in public company and not, causing accidents wherever I go in the street. I think that coming back to acceptance again, not in a passive, oh, look, I'm a little insect on my back with all my legs in the air, help me, I can't do anything on my own. But just being like, no, these things are a bit challenging, and you do sort of walk around not reading the ends of emails and everything, but there's loads of stuff that you do that is great, and there is still loads of good that you can do in the world, and that's a wonderful thing.
None of us are broken. We don't need to be fixed. But penultimately, are there any tips you've learned since your diagnoses that have helped you manage your ADHD?
A huge thing that's changed for me is taking a breath, breathing. I didn't know you were meant to process thoughts in them. I didn't know, had no idea. So I was put on a long list for a book award a long time ago, and I don't want to go into it because it caused me so much pain, not just me, other people. I took it off, and I publicly said that I was taking it off. I didn't know that it was individuals setting up book awards. I thought it was publishers doing it. And I hurt really good people by not talking to them directly. The world of books was such a closed place for me. I just reacted and was triggered by something that had nothing to do with any of that, but I hadn't addressed. There was a lot of internalized racism. What can I tell you? It was a big, fat, horrible mistake and a mess. And I have learned now to give myself space to breathe, and really, really understood that no one means me harm. And without sleep, I am nothing.
Yeah.
Whereas before, I'd say, I'll sleep when I'm dead. And I would just leave a trail of destruction.
Yeah, I think similar to the sleep one, like I talk about mum advice a lot, which is like that annoying advice. Like my mum's advice for everything is like, just have a good night's sleep, or just get some fresh air, or just like, have you had a good meal? And when you hear the advice, it feels so annoying to hear because you're like, I'm not just tired, like it's not just that. But actually all of those things have a massive knock-on effect of how you feel, like getting enough sleep, eating well, having enough time on your own, like getting out in the sunshine, exercising. It's like the last thing that you want to hear when you're in crisis mode, but it actually is the only thing that brings you out of crisis mode. So I think like going back to basics with self-care, I think is a big one for me.
Can I just add one thing to follow on from that? My grandmother had this thing of passing the time with someone. Actually passing the time. So sitting together, it doesn't have to be a good friend, but be a good friend that you've made time for when you see each other. It's just sit and passing the time with someone is so mindful. And she did it naturally. And I have learned that it doesn't serve me to be with a bunch of people in a bar with a cacophony of half-told stories. No, and that's I walk away not nourished, not feeling that my friendship has been sated. You know, it's so unsatisfactory. So I don't do that anymore.
You can get so much done. You can be so productive. We spoke about this, Ellie, in our first episode, body doubling.
Yeah.
When you're just with someone, when you're in the presence of someone, you can really feed off that energy. And it's amazing the stuff you can get done.
I'm body doubling with my friend Rachel at the moment because we both got physio exercises that neither of us want to do. And so she literally came over to my house for 15 minutes the other day. My husband took the dog for a walk and he came back with coffees because he knew that we hadn't wanted to do it. But it made such a difference.
I have to go, but I can't. I have to say this. You lot are brilliant. And look at the platform that you've given to people like us.
And you look around at your own friendship groups and it's amazing how many people you suddenly realise are like, oh, well, that's why we get on so well as well.
But equally, I don't know if it's the same with you, during my healing process, there have been people that have dropped away.
That's a boundary, realising people that you can let go.
This can't happen anymore. And I respect boundaries that other people have put against me too, because that's happened as well. Oh, that's happened. So, I'm not for everyone, and that's okay.
This has been insightful, hilarious, and quite emotional. Thank you all so much for your time today.
Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.